Are the stories from our family histories better than those found in books and novels? I wonder.
Welcome to Fridays Live.
Hello there, welcome to today's edition of Fridays Live with me, Rose Staveley-Wadham. Do let us know where you're joining in from today. I am joining you today from London. It's been rather rainy here in the capital. I do hope it's better weather where you are, so do say hello. We've got the lovely Daisy in our comments today, and then, as ever, we have a busy session for you. We're going to be looking at our new records of the week. So we're going to Bedfordshire. We're looking at some military records as well. And then we've got a literary theme, which I'll go into in a minute. We're going to be looking at one of our special newspaper titles, which is The Bookseller, and how it can be used for family history, and discovering more about some fascinating authors from the past. So on that note, our question of the week is, what book or books have you found useful for your family history research? So question of the week is, what book or books have you found useful for your family history research? We will come back to that. And I'm just going to look here, see who we've got joining us today. Kim Billy, it's bright and sunny in West Yorkshire. Can we get some of that down in London, please? I'm jealous of that. And Cameron's saying maybe Cameron's got the sunshine. Oh, well, I can't see it here. Annie's joining us. Hello, everybody. Gordon is tuning in from Alberta, where there are clear skies and it's breezy in North Wales with Janet. Roz tuning in from Massachusetts. David over on YouTube from a cloudy Somerset. He seems to be lovely up north, so do enjoy that lovely weather. And Daisy has very kindly put that question of the week into the chat, so we will come back to that later. So our literary theme. So this week, I've been lucky enough to be attending the Women's Prize events in London this week. So Findmypast is the sponsor, the proud sponsor of the inaugural Women's Prize for Non-Fiction, which was won by the incredible Naomi Klein in her work Doppelganger last night. And you can see Naomi there on the right hand side. So this is a new prize that shines a light on the obstacles faced by women writers of non-fiction. So of the top 500 best-selling non-fiction books in 2022, only 30% were actually written by women, despite women authoring 50% of all non-fiction books. And so you see Daisy has very kindly shared the link there that talks a little bit more about our partnership with the Women's Prize for Non-Fiction. So that inaugural prize was awarded last night in central London, alongside the longer established Women's Prize for Fiction, which was won by Vivi Galanashanathan for her wonderful novel Brotherless Night. So I thought I'd just share a few pictures from the event. We were lucky enough to have the chair of the judges attending, Susanna Lipscomb, who joined us a few months ago. So it was a really wonderful evening with some really, really inspiring women. And as part of that, I just want to share these little pictures here. We had our own Find My Past section at the event, and we had our Her Story tree, which you can just about see there on the left hand side. You can see Ellie in her beautiful blue dress. So we were at the event, the Women's Prize event, to shine a light also on some women from history, 5 inspiring women from history whose stories have been neglected. So the wonderful Amelia King, who was a land girl, astronomer Catherine Stevens, chef Florence Wright, White, archaeologist Winifred Lamb, and the abolitionist Elizabeth Hayrick. So this has been part of our Find Her Story campaign. So you can it's over to you now. You can pick your most inspiring woman to vote for, and the winner is going to be commemorated with a brand new plaque. So I think Daisy will kindly share the link to the page where you can find out a bit more about these 5 inspiring women who we brought to life yesterday in full costume, and you can see them there with the lovely Stanley Tucci. So that's all the literary, my literary theme this week has been born out of the wonderful Women's Prize for Fiction and Non-Fiction event. So we have a book theme, and I can already see some questions, some answers coming through to the question of the week. So I look forward to going through those in a moment. But now just on to our new records of the week. So we've got some new military records. They're joining our Honourable Artillery Company set. Some really old ones here. We're going all the way back to 1618. And some Bedfordshire records, baptisms, marriages and burials. And I've got some Bedfordshire family members, so I was quite happy about this, some Bedfordshire ancestors. And again, I'm going all the way back to 1538. So we've got some nice old records this week. And Daisy's popped the link there to those new records just in the chat there. We've got one brand new newspaper this week, but the headline, if you'll forgive the pun, is that we have added over 1 million brand new pages, which it's just incredible. It is just incredible. But yeah, first of all, let's take a little look at these Honourable Artillery Company records. So I'm going to say HAC. I'm going to make an abbreviation. Honourable Artillery Company. It becomes a bit of a mouthful once you say it over and over again. So the HAC is actually one of the oldest, if not the oldest, regiments in the British Army. Absolutely extraordinary. It traces its origins all the way back to Henry VIII. He granted a charter to the Fraternity of Artillery of longbows, crossbows and handguns. So interestingly, the use of the word artillery here is not how we think of it in a modern sense. So not like an artillery piece, sort of big guns in my layman's terms, forgive that. So this word artillery in a historic sense refers to anything sort of shot like, anything that could be fired. So anything fired from a bow. So this being a really old regiment, these new records we've added this week, they're really old too. So we go all the way back to 1618 and then all the way up to just about the Second World War with 1939. So these records consist of a variety of membership lists, mission registers, muster books, subscriptions. The HAC, they exist today. They're a charity and a part of the Army Reserve. And just pulled out an example there from some of the 20th century records that we've added this week. And this is from the 1863 to 1910 admission register, and it's for one George Herbert Chubb. And it's a detailed record. We get George's age, his admission date, his address. And clicking through to the image gives you just some extra details in the remarks column, for example, and it gives you the date of where somebody resigned. So always worth checking through to the image. Incidentally, that name Chubb might be familiar to you. It's the family of locksmiths, so Chubb locks. Rings a bell, yes. So another way to explore this HAC collection, you head to the collection page, and then you can filter by source, so you can see the range of the different sources we have for this particular record set. And I wanted to actually explore one of the earlier sources, which is this quarterage and subscription book from 1628 to 1643. So quarterage means a sum paid or received quarterly. And I love having a browse through these old books. And this is the inside page. I've just pulled it out because I just love to kind of see these records where they're really lived in, I suppose. You can see all these working outs, all these sums that have been paid in these quarterly instalments in a time before calculators, seeing the workings here. I always just find that so compelling and get a really strong sense of the past. Now, what do the actual quarterage records look like? So this is one of them here. For the wonderfully named, or perhaps unfortunately named, Francis Anguish. Now, this is from 1641. And it's not the only appearance of Francis Anguish in these records. if you have an ancestor in these records, it's likely they'll crop up several times. So, for example, we see Francis Anguish appear several times in this book, paying his dues. Now, I wanted to share another example from the Honourable Artillery Company here with another unusual name, Ichabod Dorks. I love it. Now, Ichabod was an officer with the HAC in the 1720s. His name is included in this muster book for officers in the City of London. It's listed beneath that of George Jenkins, Esquire, Major. So Ichabod Dorks is his lieutenant. So again, just worth clicking through to the image to glean that extra little bit of information. Now, onto our new Bedfordshire records this week, which have been sourced from volumes held by our partners, the College of Arms, the Royal College of Arms. Now, these new records include around 10,000 new baptisms, 7,000 new burials, and 5,000 marriage records. So they're covering the parish of Haynes, that's from 1596 through to 1812. And Flittix, and that's from 1569 through to 1790. And they've also been sourced from a book called Genealogy Bedfordiensis. Latin is not something that I studied at school. I should have really done that. But anyway, so this volume focused mainly on the landed gentry of Bedfordshire. So it's a compilation of baptisms, marriages and burials sourced from a range of places such as parish registers, bishops' transcripts, monumental inscriptions, wills as well. And they're from the years 1538 up to 1700. So again, we've got some lovely early records, and they're spread across the county of Bedfordshire in this instance. So I just pulled out an extract there from I'm going to try and say it again. Go on. Genealogy Bedfordiensis, the parish of Bedford St Mary there. And that's from all the way back to 1539. And it's just a beautiful book to browse through. It's really gorgeous. And there's a burial record there for Alicia Boyville there. And I was really excited for some Bedfordshire. My Bedfordshire family are they're called there's the Juffs and the Mobleys. I can't remember how many great she is, but a great grandmother called Fanny Mobley, and I love that name. So here are some new records from the parish of Flitwick, and they come from this absolutely beautiful volume, which you can see there. So what it is, in the early 20th century, copies of the Flitwick Parish magazine were compiled together. So this is a beautiful volume, and within these parish magazines, they actually reproduce the births and marriages and burials from the parish all the way back into the 16th century. And what I really valued about looking at these records is the explanatory text at the bottom. So beneath the lists of the burials and the baptisms, there are notes to help navigate these records. So right at the bottom there is an entry, and it says, Will, the spurious son of Mary Circuit, baptized 15th of February in 1671. The spurious son. And I hadn't seen that before, but the explanatory notes tell us that, and I quote, we note the term spurious used here to express an illegitimate child. I don't think I've actually seen that before. I guess because of the antiquity, we're going right back into the Tudor period here. But the magazine also gives us some more details for other synonyms used to indicate illegitimacy. And these, again, are not something that I know about. So it's been wonderfully educational. So other phrases include love begotten, merry begot, byblow, scape begotten, and creature. Creature is awful. So it's really, really fascinating stuff. But Andrew's familiar. But I hadn't seen it before. So absolutely fascinating there. Now, before we return to our question of the week, Karen, this is like an ongoing theme with Karen. It must be related to shadow family trees. Oh, and a spurious father. Okay. Yeah, I think that we are connected, definitely, Karen. So before we go back to our question of the week, I just wanted to talk about our newspaper updates. And it's been a big week. And we usually say it's been a big week for newspapers, but this one is a particularly big week. So we've added over 1 million new newspaper pages. It's staggering. So that's, to be exact, and it's 1,007,483 brand new pages. It's staggering, right? So we're nearly getting up to that figure of 80 million newspaper pages. So this is great. I've got my eye on 100 million, and that's going to be very exciting. Some ideas for when we reach 100 million. What should we do? I think we should have a big party. So these pages is great because they are representing all across the UK, and I've just pulled some stats there for you. So there's 9 Welsh newspapers which have been updated, 5 Scottish newspapers, 36 English newspapers, 1 for Northern Ireland as well. And we've got 1 brand new title, which is Lincolnshire's Spilsby Standard. It's really worth checking out these updates. Details as ever are on our weekly blog. And also to point out these updates, they're spanning, I think I'm going to count, 4 centuries, 1730 to 2003. So it's a lovely broad coverage this week. So I'm just going to remind the question of the week, which is, what book or books have you found useful for your family history research? So with my little literary theme here today, and let's just have a look. Karen is in South London, just way home from the Queen's House in Greenwich Park. There's amazing insight in the history surrounding it. The view of London from the top of the hill and the observatory is also amazing. I don't think I've been to the Queen's House, but I've definitely climbed that hill, and that view from the observatory is wonderful and definitely well worth the climb. So let's have a look. Rosie, she suggested Who Was Your Granny's Granny by Paul Blake, and Audrey Collins, who we remember really fondly from Findmypast videos. That's an excellent suggestion. Thank you, Rosie. And you see Jean, and Jean has found out that her second cousin, Edward Allen Domville, had written a book about the Domville family going back to 1030. Oh, wow. There's a lot of detail there. How interesting. So going through 28 generations of the Domville family. It was out of print when I first heard about it, so borrowed it from the library. Oh, wow. This is something I'm going to touch on a little bit. Are these genealogies authored for specific families? So fascinating. Just wonderful. And we've got David over on YouTube suggesting Heber's Ancestral Trails, an excellent book. That sounds intriguing. Joe, lots of books, lots of local history books. Yes, local library books. For local history. Oh my gosh, I have spent a lot of time going to the local library to find out more about the hamlet where I grew up. And at charity shops, eBay, books about First World War, photographs, fashion through the years, the Ian Mortimer books, Time Traveller's Guide to the Medieval Britain, Restoration Britain. I'm going to say there was a Tudor Britain as well. I've really enjoyed those books as well. I just love being immersed in that era and just trying to know what our forebears experienced. What was everyday like? What did it feel like? Just wonderful stuff. I would really recommend those too. And oh wow, so Karen's got a writer in Karen's family, fourth time's great grandfather was an author of school books, and 2 of his daughters were publishers in London that published some of his books. So a literary family there, with Karen, and Ellen, yes, touching on these family genealogies. So written about her mum's paternal side, one from 1999 and the other from 1992. That gave me a good place to start researching her family. So yeah, whether it's that surname that you're looking for, specifically, you can find books about a specific family name from, I don't know, Kent, or even like from a town or a city. So that can always be a great place to sort of start making connections, right? Like with my Staveley family, I've not necessarily a book, but there's a wonderful website which lists a lot of Staveley branches, and I just find that fascinating that we're all sort of in this web. But yes, unfortunately, with my Staveley line, we do really hit a brick wall with my 4 times great grandfather. So yes, well, it's good. I'm glad to get back to him. And a few more. Kimberly, lots of helpful ancestral books such as The Life of William Sancroft, The Yorkshire Genealogist. Oh, that sounds good. The Yorkshire family. Brooksbank Yeoman of the Dales. Oh, I love that. That's a wonderful, wonderful title. Jean has some wonderful suggestions as well, some more suggestions too. Another one written by a distant family member. At Genealogy Day in Blackburn, not really realising at first the connection on my paternal side. That were travellers, and written books on Irish ancestry too. So that is Kath Merriweather. Oh, wonderful. And Jane has actually helped with this, with Kath Merriweather's work there in the Showman's Guide. Oh, wonderful stuff. Okay, just seeing if there's any more. Karen, Ancestry Trails, some love from Ancestry Trails, and Internet Archive and Google Books are a great free source of family history books and sources. Yeah, I use Google Books for a lot of things, especially for my research into newspapers. There's some great guides. And back to the Queen's House is at the bottom of the hill. Okay, yeah, so I don't have to go back up the hill to it. All right, so let me just bring up my slides again. Okay, and this one. So we've got our book theme. So I just thought I'm going to talk in greater detail about one of our magazine titles. It's available as part of our newspaper collection, but so magazine might seem a little bit misleading, but it is part of our newspaper collection. So this is the Bookseller, and it joined us towards the end of last year, so it was around Christmas time. So you may have missed it with everything that was going on. And it's a great magazine, and I wanted to really highlight it today. It's still running today, and it's actually one of the United Kingdom's longest running magazines. It's the only paper magazine in publication that reports on publishing, book selling, and the library industries on a weekly basis. So it's a really fascinating title, and for us family historians and those with an interest in literature, it's a really great resource. So I'm going to take a little look at the history of this magazine and how it can be used for family history research. So starting out, the Bookseller was founded all the way back in 1858, and we have that first edition available as part of our collection. You can see the front page there, and it appeared on the 1st of January 1858. Now, the title was founded by a chap called Joseph Whitaker, and it was marketed as a handbook of British and foreign literature. Now, it actually incorporated the earlier title of Bent's Literary Advertiser, which had been founded in 1802. Okay. What was the purpose of the Bookseller then? Well, its first edition laid out its objectives. And if you really want to get a sense of our newspaper titles or magazines, heading to that first edition is really helpful, because quite often there'll be sort of an introduction, almost like a manifesto, the reason for the founding of the newspaper or publication. So the Bookseller says that it's intended primarily for the use of booksellers and publishers, furnishing them with a handy book of reference and doing for the bookselling trade what Bradshaw does for the railways, but so conducted that it may be equally useful for the book buyer and to the bookseller. So the Bookseller quickly becomes the organ of the book trade. It covered the opening and closing of bookshops across the country, as well as reviewing publications on so many different subjects. So there were sections devoted to religious books, biographies, histories, political works, poetry, fiction, geography, legal, medical, you name it, it's probably there. So the title stays with the Whittaker family. After Joseph Whittaker's death in 1875, one of his sons, George Herbert Whittaker, takes the title to a weekly publication pattern in 1909. Another key date in this title's history is 1933. That's when a young editor, 28-year-old Edmund Seagrave, takes charge, and he actually stays at the Bookseller for nearly 40 years. One of the other things that the Bookseller is known for in the 1970s, it begins to publish its best-selling lists, and it was the first publication in the UK to actually do this. So it's still running to this day, and it features profiles on authors and what's new in the publishing world. We have the years 1858 all the way up to 2008 available to search. So that's 150 years of literary history. So what I love about the Bookseller, being an all-round bookworm and English literature graduate, are tracing key moments in literary history through its pages. So, for example, here we've got an extract from a lengthy review of George Eliot's work, The Mill on the Floss, which was published in April 1860. The review is so full of praise. It calls the novel a work of art and praises the fineness of conception, the sustained strength, the faithfulness, the care, the firmness of execution, the richness of expression and colour. And what is noticeable in this review is that the reviewer calls the author he. George Eliot was, of course, the pen name of Mary Ann Evans, and this wasn't known at the time, although you can trace in our newspapers the rumblings of when it is revealed, shockingly, that this novelist is actually a woman. So from George Eliot to a children's classic, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. So the Bookseller marked the publication of this enduringly popular classic in December 1865, and it features some of the original illustrations here. So you can see one of these by John Tenniel. It's great, just so bizarre and almost so bizarre and surreal. It's modern, like for 1865. It always staggers me. And this gets a great review, which we like. So the Bookseller calls it one of the illustrated books of the season, and it praises how Alice's Adventures in Wonderland shows a freshness that's quite delightful. So it is really worth searching the pages of the Bookseller for those early review of your favourite author. So I've got a range here. So from everything from J.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit to George Orwell's 1984, which last weekend celebrated 75 years. And the ad here in June 1949 says that it sold 19,000 copies. So it was a bestseller. So super exciting. We've also got everything up to Game of Thrones. So the more we got, because we're going up to 2008, there's such a huge a raft of content here. But the question is, how can the Bookseller help with family history? So I think it's quite multivalent. There are many ways that I think it can be helpful. So first of all, it's a great contextual tool, right? It helps you get a sense of what your ancestor might have been reading at the time. We were talking earlier about that context of that experience. What was like life? What did it feel like? How were people entertained? And books are such a huge part of that. I mean, I've pulled out an example of one of the bestseller lists here. It's a top 20 list. We're quite modern here, from October 2005, but this just overwhelmed me with early noughties nostalgia that I had to sort of share. So topping the top 20 of the mass market fiction is the Da Vinci Code. I'm sure we can remember everybody reading that sort of 20 odd years ago. 2005. So I think the same way we can look at the older pages of the Bookseller and have an appreciation of what books people were talking about in the 1860s, 1870s. We can see in 1949 that it was 1984 by George Orwell that was very popular. And also, I just had to point out on this best-selling list is Philippa Gregory's work, The Constant Princess, which I do remember buying around this time. And then there's another aspect of the Bookseller that I think can be really helpful. It profiles books about genealogy. So this is something that we've touched on here, isn't it? I think there's been a few examples. So if you're looking for a work on a particular family name or something, it might be just worth searching the Bookseller with that family name to see if there's any genealogical books that might be able to help with your research. So sort of like a guide, a catalogue, I suppose. So, for example, I've just pulled out a few here. There's the Illustrated History of the Cooper Family of Byfleet, Killarney Castle, County Tipperary, and Abbeville House from County Dublin. That's quite a long title there. Or the Snappier Shores of Coventry. So I think it'd be quite useful. In that you might be led to works that might help you unlock your family story that's a little bit more. And I think we can move on to maybe the more obvious on the nose aspect of the Bookseller that can help with our family history. So anybody with ancestors who were actually booksellers, that was their trade. So I sort of wanted to have a little dig into how many bookseller ancestors there might be out there. So I did that by searching our census pages with the keyword of just bookseller, and I got over 50,000 results. And I think there will be more, but they're included in these are booksellers, but then there's booksellers' assistants, people working in bookshops across the country. So one such bookseller was Walter Belcher, and I came across his entry in the 1921 census. So he works as a bookseller, stationer, and printer in Bridgewater in Somerset, and he's an employer, so it is his business. He's 63. He's noted that he is an employer, and his business is at 29 Fore Street in Bridgewater, which is separate from his home address of Binford Place. Now, he's assisted by his 56-year-old wife, Sarah Ann, whose profession is bookseller and stationer's assistant. So you've got both going on there, and a couple working together. And Rosie's been using the Bookseller there. I found my late cousin mentioned reading the audio version of a Frederick Forsyth. Oh, fascinating stuff. Yes, do let me know any discoveries that you may have found as we're going through the Bookseller. So having found my example bookseller here, our Walter Belcher, I wanted to know what could the pages of the Bookseller tell us about our bookseller. So going to our newspaper search, I searched for Walter Belcher in our name field, and then I limited my search to results from the Bookseller only. So you can do that by going to the top right of the search screen and then choosing your title of publication. And what I really like about this is actually you can choose to select multiple titles. So if you're looking in sports newspapers, for example, you can select a range of those. But just doing the Bookseller on this occasion, and I got some results for him. So on the left hand side, you'll see an entry under the heading Trade and Literary Gossip, and it says, Mr. Walter Belcher, bookseller of Fore Street, Bridgewater, has just been installed WM of the Perpetual Friendship Lodge, number 135, Bridgewater. So he's a Freemason, and this was reported from the 21st of January 1910. So what I really like about the Bookseller like this is, it's not an insignificant piece of news at all, but these newspapers, these magazines, these trade magazines will report on the minutiae, right? So they contain these wonderful nuggets of information. We have another paper, which is the Bioscope, and that is a title about the cinema industry, and it contains the same kind of this trade and literary gossip. What was going on? What was happening? And again, even though it's a national paper, I suppose it's published in London, it covers the entirety of the UK and sometimes Ireland too. So Walter Belcher is again mentioned by the bookseller in August 1925, so that's about 15 years later, and this time it's under the heading Trade Changes, and it reads, Bridgewater, the old established bookselling and stationery business of Mr. Walter Belcher, 29 Fore Street, has been acquired by Messrs. W.H. Smith and Son. So Walter's business has been taken over by one of the big boys, one of the big book-selling boys, W.H. Smith. We of course recognise that name. But by this point, Walter would have been older, so probably ready to retire. So it's probably a smart thing for him to have sold the business. But it's interesting here, we learn from this snippet that his book-selling business is deemed to be old, established. How old? You bet we're going to dig into that a little. And just in case you're interested, that address at 29 Fore Street, it's not W.H. Smith anymore, it's now a coffee shop. So to establish just how old Walter Belcher's book-selling business was, I needed to understand his journey to becoming a bookseller. How does one become a bookseller? So Walter was born in 1858 in Chippenham in Wiltshire. He was son of William Belcher, who was a baker and a maltster, and Mary. And we find a 12-year-old Walter with his parents in the 1881 census at the baker's shop on Timber Street in Chippenham. So his family seems to be doing quite well. They've got 2 servants. One of the servants is actually working as a nurse. And Walter's sister Elizabeth is working as an assistant for that family of bakers. But it's not a business. Baking is not a business that Walter follows. He switches baking for bookselling. And 10 years later, in the 1891 census, we find 22-year-old Walter living in Clevedon in Somerset, and he is working as a bookseller's assistant. So we see that clear trajectory of Walter's career. By 1901, Walter makes his way to Bridgewater, and he is working now as a bookseller. So he's 42, he's single, he's living alone. So we know now, by the point of 1925, Walter sells his business. So it's at least 24 years old, if not older. So marriage comes a bit later in life to our Walter. We'll call in 1921 that he was married to Sarah. 1901, he's not. And we find him in the 1911 census working as a bookseller, stationer and printer in Bridgewater. And he's living then with his wife, Sarah Ann. And it says that he's been married for 9 years. And they've got a 4-year-old son, little Walter Jr. So Walter Belcher Sr. actually marries soon after the 1901 census. And it's always just a reminder that these censuses are wonderful records, but they are just a snapshot in time. So if you look at the 1901 census and see 42-year-old Walter Belcher as a single man, we might as well think, confirmed bachelor, but he's probably engaged at that point. The 1901 census was taken in March 1901, but according to the newspaper, the Wiltshire Times, he was married in April 1901. So he's only married a month after that census was taken. And again, newspapers provide wonderful details on marriage. Just for example, if there weren't the parish registers for this wedding. So we learn that Walter marries Sarah Ann, who is the daughter of William Solway of Moorlinch, Bridgewater, on the 24th of April at St Mary's Church in Bruton. So it's a small passage, but you get a lot of detail. You get the place of the ceremony, some family members, and place of residence. And it's to the newspapers that we return to learn about the passing of our bookseller Walter Belcher. So the article that I found was headed "Former Bridgewater Tradesman, Death of Mr. Walter Belcher," and it was published by the Taunton Courier in March 1938. And it begins: "Many old friends at Bridgewater and in the neighbourhood will regret to learn of the death at Kingston-on-Thames on Thursday night of Mr. Walter Belcher, a former well-known Bridgewater tradesman." We learn from this also how Walter was 79 by the time he died, and how for more than 40 years he was in business in Fore Street and George Street as a printer, stationer and bookseller. So we've got that years now. So He was in Bridgewater as a bookseller for some 40 years. And I find these types of obituaries so useful and so fascinating. And so although Walter he'd moved to Kingston, so he'd moved to Surrey, and he'd been there for a while. So after his retirement, so he'd been there for some sort of 15 years. The news of his death is reported on in a newspaper back in Somerset. And Walter, I mean, and not to diminish Walter in any way, he's not an important thing in the grand scheme of things, but it was important that the news of his death was reported back in his home county. And again, this reminder to us that not to limit our newspaper searches geographically, right, in the sort of first instance. So if we had seen a death record for Walter in Surrey and we'd limited our newspaper search to only looking in Surrey, we would have missed this lovely obituary here that was published in Somerset. And just seeing this comment here from Kim. In the 1911 census, my great-grandparents claimed 17 years marriage. Turned out it wasn't to each other. Yeah, and this is it. Like, sometimes they lie. Sometimes our ancestors are a bit economical with the truth, or, all that kind of misunderstanding. Maybe they were thinking of how long they'd been married to their partners and then put that together. Who knows? But it does make things sometimes a little bit trickier for us genealogists. Now, not only does the bookseller cover the bookselling trade, of course, it covers those who made a career by writing, authors. So you may well, when we touched on this at the beginning of today, you might well have seen our Find Her Story campaign, in which we are highlighting 5 incredible women from history. So if you haven't read about those 5 women yet and voted for your Her Story heroine, please do. But in that spirit, I wanted to pull out 5 women writers, novelists, about whom we can learn a little bit more through the bookseller. Now, I've selected 5 women novelists who are roughly contemporaries, and they were born from the 1840s through to the 1870s. And I found them by simply searching for the word novelist in optional keywords in our census forms. So they are describing themselves either in censuses or the 1939 register by the term novelist. And I'm beginning here with Julia Cartwright Addy, who in the 1881 census, under the name Julia Mary Addy, describes herself as an author, novelist, and art critic. And researching women in the newspapers can be quite hard because it's the names that they use. So we touched on George Eliot and Mary Ann Evans. So that's obviously a famous example, but these people who I didn't really know about when I was researching them, it becomes more of a challenge. So luckily, when I searched for the name that was given in the census, so Julia Mary Addy, I actually came up with results for her pen name, which so she was writing under the name of Julia Cartwright with the parenthesis of Mrs. Addy. So the search actually picked up those different names and brought me the correct results. So we've got her work advertised here in the Bookseller, and it's called Hampton Court, and it's I assume about the art of Hampton Court. It's got 16 illustrations on art paper, so we know that Julia was an art critic, and she focused on the Italian Renaissance. But what I really love about Julia's record in particular, that as early as 1881, she is choosing to call herself a novelist in the census, as well as an art critic and an author. And she's young, she's 29 at the time, right? I think it's just so bold. I think it's so gutsy that we have this woman stating her profession, stating her creativity, stating her trade as a writer, as an author. So inspiring. And then this advert here from 1909 to over nearly 30 years later, we see her work advertised. So yes, Julia is on my list to find out more about. Now, next up, we have Effie Adelaide Rowlands, and I came to her in the 1921 census, where she is enumerated under the name of E. Maria Albanese, alongside her Italian husband Carlo Albanese, who is a professor of music. And for A. Maria Albanese, she is 60, and she lists her profession as simply novelist. Now, searching the bookseller for the name Albanese, I found quite a lot of results, and we're always grateful for those more unusual names, right? In our family history research. So we've got an example on the right. I've just put a little circle around it. One of her works called The Courage of Love, and Effie, to give her real name, Effie, she wrote under the name of Madame Albanese. So she wrote more than 250 romance novels. So that name, Madame Albanese, it's so romantic. It really works for her genre. And I actually found a picture of Madame Albanese, and there's a photograph of her from 1929 in London's Daily News, and her book A Heart for Sale was reviewed. We have another inspiring woman author here. She is Mary Gleed Tuchiet. So she was someone I had to resort to the old Google. She is in the census as Mary Gleed Tuchiet. She lists herself as a novelist. So when I looked up Mary Gleed Tuchiet, I found her pen name of Maxwell Gray. So she's 74 in 1921, and she's living with her secretary, Mabel Irene Champion, and her servant, Ellen Williams. And what I really love about this particular return is that Mary Gleed Tuchiet has written for both Mabel and Ellen that they work for Mary Gleed Tuchiet Novelist, just in case whoever was reading the census had missed that fact that Mary was a novelist. And she actually published her most famous work back in the 1880s, showcased down the left-hand side by the bookseller, which was called The Silence of Dean Maitland. So she wrote under that moniker of Maxwell Gray. So like Mary Ann Evans, she decided to adapt that masculine pen name. But as the bookseller review, we've got another one on the right-hand side of a review for another one of her works from 1898. The persona of Maxwell Gray is identified as an authoress. So she's not pretending to be masculine in this sense. It is known that she is a woman writer, and her work is highly praised. The review says of her novel, Sweethearts and Friends, it is in every way thoroughly well worth reading. I'd like that. So yeah, I think she's a really fascinating character, an Isle of Wight author, and I just think it's so interesting that she decides to continue with her pen name, given her success and given her positive reviews. Now, our penultimate woman writer today, again, she simply lists herself as novelist. It's in the 1921 census again. She is Elizabeth Burgoyne Corbett, and like Mary Gleed Tuchiet, she's actually the same age, so she's 74. She's a widow. She doesn't actually write that she's head of the household, although she's listed at the top. She states she puts mother, which I think is really lovely. So she was published under the name Mrs. George Corbett, her husband's name, and she wrote popular stories that often appeared in newspapers. But she's also most famous for writing some feminist works, including the wonderfully named New Amazonia, and this was a feminist utopian novel. But the reviewer over at the Bookseller, and this is, we get the book reviews as well, in 1890, wasn't impressed by the work, a bit nonplussed, I suppose. And it says, the review says, at the cost of 1 shilling, the reader may learn Mrs. Corbett's ideas as to what the future ought to be. They are, if not particularly interesting, at least original. Okay. Well, I'd like to acquire a copy of New Amazonia to find out for myself. So we end our look at women writers with the Welsh novelist Berta Ruck. Now, she gives her profession as novelist in the 1939 register under the name of Amy R. Oliver. So Oliver is her married name, which was incidentally Onions until her husband decided to change it. So didn't fancy being Amy Onions. And somebody with green pen has actually come back into this document to annotate her name with Roberta Ruck. So Berta Ruck was her pen name. So Berta Ruck, like her fellow writer E. Maria Albanese, was a prolific writer of romance fiction. So in the middle there, you can see her work, Love at a Festival, advertised by the Bookseller in 1951. And her stories were also turned into films, as we see in the advert there on the left-hand side. It was a film called Sir or Madam, a story of a modern society girl, and that was advertised in the Bioscope. So that's our cinema title that I mentioned earlier, and I might do a deep dive into that. Yeah, and Berta Ruck, she actually pops up in the newspapers quite a lot. In the Daily Mirror, she was kind of working with them, I think, as a sort of, an op-ed, an opinion piece. There's an article there on the right-hand side from the Daily Mirror, December 1931. It's got a photograph of her, and it talks about her lifestyle. So she talks about the benefits of swimming, as well as eating lots of fruit, sleeping early, and walking the dog. And this combination must have worked for Berta, because she actually lived to the age of 100. So follow her advice. I think we're doing well on that. So Berta really finishes my look at these wonderful women novelists. There's just so much to explore, and I could go on and I could do more. But it's been a real pleasure to talk all things books. And I see got Daphne. Oh, don't worry. Please watch on catch up. Yes, if you're joining us late, do come back and watch us back. So we've got Kim. I think the only profession missing from my ancestors is author. I may have to become one to change that. Please do. I love that. We've all got, as family historians, we've all got so many stories that we've uncovered, and that we should tell and put pen to paper. Because I asked at the top of the episode whether our family stories are better than those to be found in books and novels, and I think in many ways they are, because they're at the very basic level, they are true, and they are the stories of what has brought us to where we are today, and all of those tiny little incidents that make us who we are. I think so in many ways they are better. But thank you so much for joining me today. As ever, it's been a real pleasure to be speaking with you. We'll be back next week. So in the meantime, have a lovely weekend. I'll see if I can get my cat. Panda is curled up there. He's a bit tired. But yes, lovely to speak to you all today, and have a lovely weekend. Goodbye.